Coming to you from the M&M Exterior Studio in Nooksville, Virginia, this is Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle, the introvert's extrovert. She talks to people so you don't have to. For now.
Well, I'm so excited for you coming today and coming on my podcast because you are a podcast host as well.
Yes, it is a labor of love, I think, to do the podcasting scene. But such a fun way to kind of just share your thoughts and your message.
Yeah, definitely. Well, why don't you introduce yourself, Alyssa?
Absolutely. So I'm Alyssa Adams. I am a clinical psychologist turned intuitive business coach. So right now I work with entrepreneurs who are coaches, therapists, holistic practitioners to help them really grow their practices, get their ideas out into the world, and do things in a non-traditional way.
I love that, in a non-traditional way. Well, as you know, we cross paths through networking. We're actually a speed networking event, which feels like speed dating because, you know, it's like quick. And once you said you were a clinical psychologist, I was like, you can't see me if you're listening, but I'm like looking all like doughy eyed, like, oh goodness. Oh, I'd love to talk to you more. So you have your podcast, The Uncommon Couch, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was like, oh, I would love to pick your brain because you've gone through the world of clinical psychology and now you're doing things, you know, building a business and helping other people. And so how did you go from kind of being in that clinical psychology world to where you are now?
Yeah. So I will try to make this as concise as possible because there's a lot packed in.
Yeah, don't worry. This isn't a little video soundbite. This is a podcast. Buckle up, get a cup of coffee.
I know, that sounds great, right? Just settle in. So I started in a really traditional way, right? Like I went through graduate school, got my doctorate in clinical psychology. I specialized in health psychology and neuropsychology. So that means I worked in a lot of hospitals, rehab hospitals. So working with people who had different health issues or neurological issues. So I did kind of the traditional route for a while, actually, and found myself burning out really from
just wrote down work. Burnout question.
Yeah. We're like on the same wavelength. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I really was I was burning out. I was doing a lot of clinical work. I was really tired, just exhausted from that. I was working in a hospital that was really chaotic. So that kind of just compounded things. And so I ended up taking a job where I was the director of an integrative health outpatient clinic. And I thought like, oh, this is wonderful, right? Like I'm so passionate about integrative health and how that all can fit into your healthcare plan. And I felt really like driven by the mission of what we were doing. People were getting help and benefit. And we were really understaffed. And I was working constantly, like just all weekend, every weekend, all night. Like I was just working constantly, just trying to keep the place afloat. And burned out like even more.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I ended up getting mono actually at during that job, like in my early 30s, I guess I was. Wow. No one I knew had mono, so I don't even know kind of how that came about. But I was just so run down, so exhausted. Wow. So I actually ended up leaving that job and moving into more of a leadership administrative role in the kind of like in the national office of the organization where I worked. And I thought that would like kind of let me hit pause for a moment.
Yeah. Solve all the problems for now, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Switch to a different place.
Switch to another place, like kind of take a step back from client-focused work. But it kind of brought with it like this other set of problems, right? Where I was like, I don't really like working on spreadsheets all day. Like, I don't really like the kind of administrative tasks that go along with that kind of office job. So I missed the busyness of the hospital. I missed client-based work, but I knew that also burned me out. And I didn't like my administrative office job with like 1,000 spreadsheets and releasing payments and doing all this like really in the weeds stuff. So then I was like, well, what the hell do I do now? Right? Like I was really just at this kind of career impasse. So actually that's how I started to get into coaching, because I was thinking about how do I do client work in a way that feels a little lighter, in a way that lets me kind of leverage all my years of experience and training, and how do I create something that's different, but fits for me? So I went back to school and I trained to do coaching. I became a certified coach, and I started to build a coaching practice as I was working full time. And so
you were in the admin side of that,
as
right?
I was in the admin side. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that kind of helped me do some more like client-based work, like a work with people on things, and as I was doing that, like I thought, like many of us do, is if you're a good coach, you figure people will find you, right? Like it'll somehow
just work hard, just do your thing. And if you build it, they will come. So all you have to do is just do your job, and that's it.
Yeah. So not the case, as I discovered. So what happened was, right, like I started this coaching practice, and I realized I needed to, if I really wanted to kind of double down and make this successful and have it potentially as a transition plan to move out of my full-time job, I needed to get really serious about like learning about marketing and sales and who I wanted to work with and what I wanted to do, and just learning this whole new skill set. And interestingly, like I started to really love learning all of those things, because it was really, to me, it was psychology, right? But just like applied in this new way.
Yes, that explains why I love all those same things. Like it's all together.
Yeah, it's all like, understanding people and communicating and kind of clarifying your thoughts and your vision and ideas. And so I got really interested in that, and then ended up kind of turning that into helping other coaches and therapists and wellness providers and people who are in the kind of service-based, often solo entrepreneurs, to build their practices. So my spin on that too was kind of like weaving in pieces of intuition and mindset and psychology into the business strategy piece. So it's been really fun.
That's awesome. I love your take on it too, because, being in the entrepreneurial world and have been for a long time, one of the not questions, but concerns that I feel like when we talk a lot about is, this has been since my Mary Kay days, and forever. It's that whole like salesy thing. And I say salesy on purpose, that it's kind of that, nah. And it's funny because I feel like I was lucky to learn early on that sales doesn't have to be a bad word. Like everything is sales. You might not work in what you think of as a sales position, but it's like at the end of the day, it's all part of this sale. So it's finding, the right fit for you and finding the right messaging. And so I think that's why for me, your background with psychology is so helpful, because it's kind of helping work with people so that they can find that right fit. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. And like, I think I had this moment too, where I really, cause I knew nothing about sales, right? Like zero. But like, I think that I immediately started to resonate with like people or courses and trainings out there where people were doing it in this way that felt really helpful and like really approachable and like really natural. So that was kind of a nice entryway into things. And then it occurred to me at one point that like when I was in that position of like directing this outpatient clinic for integrative health, right? Like we needed referrals to kind of build and grow our clinic. Yeah. So that meant that I had to go to all of these different departments and physicians and present and talk about the work we did and talk about people's success and, encourage referrals, talk to them about how to refer and how we could partner together to help their clients. And I was like, I think that's sales. Like, I think that,
that's sales,
like a bit of sales, right? Yeah. So it kind of came together for me in these different ways where it felt like using some of that passion to really fuel getting people what they need and want. It was just super interesting to me.
And that's always the best sales too, is that when you're fulfilling a need, like it's when I did Mary Kay, I almost quit when I took a professional selling class when I was still at college. And I realized everything I'd learned about helping women was sales techniques. And I was like, no, I thought I was just helping them feel better about themselves and this and that. And yes, that all was true, but it's like, it's all part of a process and, finding what they need. And of course, you're not giving people things they don't need. I mean, there's definitely a negative side to sales, but
sure.
But of course there's not. There's also, that's the way kind of everything works and relationships just with people and all of that, kind of how you approach a conversation. I just did a podcast. We just recorded of how to have difficult conversations. And it's, we talked about, I feel or something, instead of you do this, I feel. It's like, that's really like selling your opinion in a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So for sure. It kind of pops up in all these different ways. And I remember also thinking at one point where like so much of my background was in health and working with people to help improve their health and help them to engage in healthier behaviors and to help motivate them. And even like reflecting on some of the motivational interviewing and the different techniques and skills, I was like, I think some of that applies, right? Like you were
warming the market.
Yeah, like it's a different framework, of course, and it's a different endpoint, but the conversation and the way that I like showed up in the conversation in this like motivating place felt a little similar to me. So it's just interesting overlap.
And the thing is nowadays, it's like the authenticity and that word kind of is starting to get like, people are getting burned out by it. But that's the thing with, I feel like so much stuff I've seen is just putting more of you out there, like kind of what you're passionate about and leaning into that. And I love with you, like you said, about leaning into the intuition with helping people with that. And then doing things non-traditionally, which I like. That's why I like your journey of kind of going through the clinical psychology world and then admin and now, and then a business coach, but now a business coach to the people, to that market to help them. Because when we first talked, what kind of hit that little ping for me was I have so many friends in the, therapist, coach, healer world. And the thing I've seen though, is the burnout, my social worker friends from 18 years ago, just kind of, that was when it started of, oh my gosh, this field is so heavy. The people field basically is so heavy and you get so burned out. And so when there's ways to either help you not get burned out or ways to channel your energy, because it's almost like I think of it as like the relay race with passing the baton. Like you don't have to run the race the whole time by yourself. Maybe you're just meant to run it for a few years and then pass the baton to somebody else. So that all being said, I think that because we get into these positions and we think this is it, but as your journey has shown us, it's okay to ebb and flow and change. I know you've said that like people get stuck in these boxes that they make for themselves, but then, one, like, how do we make those boxes? Like, what do you mean? No, this was chosen for me. It just happened, okay, so I want to like dig more into that. And then how do we start moving out of those boxes?
Yeah. Such great questions. I feel like we could talk about that for like 3 days straight.
Let's
right?
do it. Let's do it.
There's so much to say. I mean, I think one of the things that I end up talking with clients a lot about is that our profession and it can be kind of rigid. It can be a little inflexible. With love, I say that. So it can kind of tell us that there's this list of things that you must do. There's these list of things that you must think. There's this list of things that you must be and embody. And that's it, right? Like those are your choices. There's this list of places you can work or what you can do. And that's all. So I think you just kind of you just take that on, I think, without even realizing it. And especially if, like you're primed, I think as I was, right, I always have like a little bit of a rebellious side, but the other part of me is like, I like to have success. Like I like to do what I think is going to help me achieve the thing I want. So if you have people over the years who are your professors or supervisors or whomever telling you like, these are the things you do, and then you have this success at the end, you're like, okay, here's the path. These are the things, right?
Keep doing it. It's like the carrot, like, don't you want to get to this? This is this, whether it's reaching this position or this, that equates success, and you will be a good student or employee or whatever human if you do these things.
Exactly. Yep. If you show up in this way and you do these things and you get here, and then you're sort of like, well, maybe I don't want here. Like, maybe that's not what I thought it might be, or maybe it's great for other people, but not a fit for me. And I think there's a place of having this like shocking honesty with yourself around, I don't think I want this thing that maybe I thought I wanted at one point, or is right for other people, but maybe not me, right? Like, we all have our different paths. So I think being really aware of when you've taken on an identity or rules or a way of being or something that just doesn't fit, like a coat that doesn't fit, and letting yourself really be honest about that, because that sets you up for all kinds of dissatisfaction, I think, in your personal and your professional life.
Sure. Shocking honesty. That's powerful right there.
Yeah.
Do you think when we run from this shocking honesty is when all the other problems start compounding? That's the right word.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that's part of it, right? You're trying to like live out this identity that maybe isn't right for you or is no longer right for you. Like, maybe
that's
it was
a good
fine.
point. Yeah.
Like, there was a period of time where I feel like I was really in it. Like, I was feeling really passionate. I was doing work. I liked it. I learned a lot. And then you do move sometimes, right? You can move into a space where I think like it just doesn't fit anymore. Maybe it's no longer the path. And being open to that changing.
And that's scary. Even just the words shocking is like shock and awe. So I feel like, if I were listening, and which I am listening to you right now, so I can speak from experience. But this, I just feel like, and this is why I love sharing people's stories and things like that, because I feel like if you're sitting there like, oh crap, I'm doing something that is not fulfilling, or I hate, or just simply said, I hate my life, like something that creeps up in a lot of people's minds sometimes. Yeah. And you start peeling back the layers to find the areas that you can be shockingly honest about, of like, what's not fulfilling you. And like I said, this is a combination of speaking from experience and speaking with others, is if and when you get to that point, though, the very next thing is, but then what? Like, I just sunk all this money into this career, being, something. Yeah. And if I walk away, then what? And so I would love to hear some insight of how to help when you're at that place, like, okay, Alyssa, I'm going to be shockingly honest with myself, but then I'm going to have that, oh shit moment of now what? So what do we do with now what?
Yeah, that's like the fun part, right? Like, to think about, like what other possibilities are there, right? Like what could you create? Like, what do you actually want? And letting yourself explore a little bit of that. I mean, I would argue that often people know if they let themselves know, like if they are okay with saying the words out loud, they kind of know.
I love that you said, let yourself explore. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no, go ahead, please.
When you said that, let yourself explore, I was like, yes, that's it. It's turning the fear to excitement, which I was just telling some teenagers the other day is registers the same way in your body. I don't know where I heard that from, but we're just going to go with it. So I've always said, like, I'm excited. I started doing that early on. Like, I'm excited. Well, I might be a little fearful too, but I'm going to ride the excitement train. So I loved that, shifting to the excitement and then let yourself explore. That's the freedom when you when you reach that point of honesty.
Yeah. Like, what are you drawn to? What are the things that you feel like I'm naturally really good at this, or I really enjoy it, or it's something that I've always wanted to do or pick up or something. Like in a way that feels, I don't know, like you're paying attention to the parts of yourself that you probably just ignored for a long time.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. Before I started the podcast, I had coffee with, she's been a guest on the podcast. She's like an intuitive business coach as well. And I remember we were talking and she was saying similar things. And I was like, but no, I've been doing this for, 12 years and I committed to it. And if I don't do it, I wasn't saying all this out loud. I was like having a normal conversation, but the rigid words in my head were like, no, it's okay for I was the biggest person who said, like, it was my Mary Kay days. Like, it's okay if it's a reason, season, lifetime, like it could just teach you confidence. It could and I love that for people. And I was like, that's okay for other people, but why for me did I feel like I couldn't? And that alone was like, if I feel trapped versus, being here, it was just so funny. Like it was sitting across and you and I can see each other now, but it was like, just kind of looking at me like, are you making the connection? Do you see there? It was like, oh, so you mean it's okay for me to do something new instead of fighting, like just waiting for it to come back, just waiting for,
I think what you're sharing is really powerful too, because it also like you're giving the example of what we see a lot of people do, which is like litigate and then relitigate with themselves around like why you should keep doing this thing. Right. So if you're doing that a lot to keep yourself engaged or going, like, maybe that's a thing we look at. Right?
Maybe that's where we need to dig a little deeper to explore more. Yeah.
And what are the odds really, like, to think about, hey, if we have like hopefully a long life, let's imagine so, right? Like, what are the odds that you pick a thing early on and you're like, no, that's the thing forever. There will be no changes, edits, revisions. Yeah. Like, really, what are the odds of that? We'll pick up no new interests. I will be pulled in no new directions. Like, I almost feel like it's more normal or not normal. I don't like that word, but like more expected that you're going to be pulled in these different directions sometimes. Yeah. You want to be.
Well, because I started a podcast, because it's like free therapy for me, I'll just throw out more of my stuff and we can talk about it. I had this realization recently because I always look back because I like storytelling. I like telling stories. I always like find these things that amuse me from my life. But then the more I tease them out, I'm like, oh crap, that's some stuff right there we could unpack. So one of my funny things, quirks, was I found little diaries, journals from when I was a kid. I'm sure I've talked about this before on the podcast, but I would only have like one entry and then like 3 years later, one more entry. So I rarely wrote in them. But I remember I was writing down in 5th grade, my crushes. And I said, this is whose class I'm in and I have a crush on. And I switched from pen to pencil to write their name. I didn't want to commit because if I ended up not liking them or they were a jerk or something, like I didn't want that in pen in my diary. So that was like my little just silly, like, oh, I have commitment issues. Ha ha ha. But then I really started unpacking that. And I'm like, you know what? It's like just with my Mary Kay, like I loved it. And I didn't and even when I quit, it's not because I didn't love it. It's just, this was like, I'm finding more of my groove. But I realized I'm like, one reason for journaling, I know when you're like growing and all the stuff that you should journal, because then you can look back and see how much you've grown. And I realized I was like, I don't want to look back and see how much I've grown because that will show how not good I was. And I just want to be good all the time. So I've been unpacking that for the last couple of years because getting even started on the podcast, it was like, I know that you just need to start because you'll get better.
Yeah, definitely.
But then that means I'm going to have stuff out in the world that is not great. Yeah. Spoiler alert. What if I just think none of it's great? It's all just what it is. It is what it is. Who to say what's good or bad?
Right. I mean, and we come up with these really harsh descriptions, right? That it's not good or something about it is not right, when someone else who listens to it could be like, wow, this is really wonderful. Like, this was so important to me.
Yeah.
And we make it like mean these things about ourselves that it doesn't mean, and I think like maybe this is not helpful, but
I love it. I love anything.
Okay. Helpful. I
love everything.
I'll say it anyway.
Oh my gosh. I love everything. Because if it doesn't help us, it might help someone. That's why I'm always willing, like, let's like stir this up and just see what happens,
Like I try to remind myself that most people are not paying that much attention to me
true.
or what I'm saying, right? Like,
true.
No one is going to be like, 6 weeks ago, you said this one thing and like what it wasn't well thought out, and now you can't change. Like, just no one is tracking that closely what we're doing besides ourselves. So there's freedom in that, I think, right? To get out there, to be imperfect, to just take the action.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. See, that's brilliant. That's one of my favorite. My mom told me that. I don't know if it was some saying she read somewhere, but it was like, when you're in your teens, you think everyone's thinking about you. And then when you're like in your 30s or whatever, 40s, you don't care what people think about you. And by your 60s, you realize no one was ever thinking about you in the first place. And I think about that all the time. And we were just at, I was out with my friend's teenage daughter and with some other people, and I was making a joke about diarrhea. Like, I was doing it to cause people needed to cut in line. And I was like, just tell them you had to run to the bathroom because of diarrhea and they'll just let you by because no one wants to question you. And it was funny because she was so uncomfortable, understandably so. If I would have been 16, I would have been mortified.
Yeah.
But to me, it was just so funny because I'm like, who gives a crap, pun intended? No one's like, no one cares. And if anything, it's just another teen who's like, oh my gosh, that's so embarrassing. But like, no one cares.
Yeah.
But it's so hard.
Remember that or remember that person that, it is hard.
Or if they do, they don't know me. So like, okay, if anything, they've got a good story to be like, remember when that random person, but like, okay, it's not affecting my life at all. So, but when your hormones and your brain is still developing, I would have been very embarrassed, I'm sure too. So like, I recognize that, but it was just that moment of like, oh my gosh, we're in that transition where you're embarrassed, but I'm like not caring. And then I'll get to that point in a few more years where it's like, oh, no one was even listening to us. I'm thinking that people are actually listening. And see, I even said, oh, they'll remember it. It'll be a story. And it's like, nope. As soon as they got on that, got done with that line, they were on to something new. They didn't even care.
Because everyone's kind of, they've got their own things happening in their head and stuff going on. And
so funny. I love that reminder. It's like we think people think so much more about us than they do. And I like that. So I'm a verbal processor. That's why I always like share my stuff. And then it allows me to think about it. And so the other thing you kind of mentioned that made me think is, it's the whole non-judgmental thinking too. I'm glad you brought that up about we put these judgments on stuff. So like you said, like whether it's bad, like it's not bad. It's just your skills. It's like, your skills improve. So then you change things, but it doesn't, I'm the one putting the judgment on whether it's bad or good, but who's to say?
Yeah. It's just the start, right? Like it's just the place you started. So like we do get into these just patterns with how we talk about things to ourselves or how we explain things to ourselves. And just to notice it and shift it can really like break up some of that static that comes.
Noticing, that's such a big thing. I feel like I've been saying, hearing, learning over the last 2 years is notice it. Don't judge it. Just notice a thought comes in. Notice it. So I love how we've kind of gone through like you realize you're in this box. You realize you don't want to be in this box. So you start having the excitement about saying, okay, I'm not, I'm going to be shockingly honest with myself. That's like realizing you don't want to be in that box you're in. Let yourself start exploring. So now you come up with some ideas, and let's say there's kind of some crazy ideas, because I have to say, like, I'm very lucky because of my entrepreneurial world combined with supportive friends. I've been able to share some crazy ideas like, I'm going to start a podcast. No, I don't have a business. No, it's not an offshoot of my business the way other people start podcasts. I'm going to do that first. People that have, supported, because I think when you're an outside the box thinker, it's easier to do that. So if someone's ready to do something a little outside of the box, non-traditional, they've started letting themselves explore, they've gotten there. What do you feel like is a great next step that they could take?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of depends on what it is. Sometimes when people come to me, especially mental health professionals or people who are looking to kind of branch into adjacent fields or kind of something related to that, usually the conversation kind of starts with like, I kind of want to do this other thing, right? Like, or I want to also do coaching, let's say, or I want to have a course, or I want to bring intuitive tools into my work. So something that's a little different, right? That they're not quite sure where to go to talk about it or to get support or just to have a thought partner around it and kind of explore that. So, I think like the first step feels like just exploring what it is that you want to do and kind of why you feel sort of pulled to do it. And it doesn't have to always make sense, right? Some of us do things that don't make a lot of sense on paper and are fine, right?
Yeah.
So I think like considering that, I mean, usually my work with people is a lot around the how too, right? Like how do we actually create this thing that you want? So taking some of those action steps that get you clarity and then we moving into action around like, okay, let's do this thing you say you want. Let's do it.
That's awesome. You work with, the therapist, coaches, healers field, but almost just anyone that says, okay, I've got this area of expertise or this knowledge. I'm going to do something outside of the box, but now how do I actually start doing it?
Yeah. I actually, this week I have a course that's kind of launching actually that is about creating your signature program. And we do that either through doing an online course, like a self-study course, or a group program, or some people opt to create a signature program and deliver it one-on-one with people. But the idea of that is really to kind of take all your different pieces of expertise and training and experience and all of that, those kind of pieces of wisdom that you've picked up over the years and really integrate them to create a signature system that's unique to them and helps them stand out. And part of what we do when we're doing that is that we're actually building it from the beginning with the idea of making it compelling and sellable to people. Because what I often see happening with my people that I work with, my coaches, my therapists, my wellness practitioners, like we love the process of stuff, right? We love the like mindfulness aspects or the meditation pieces or the like, we love the process of change. So they tend to just build stuff around that, which ends up being like an intellectual exercise because we haven't positioned it in a way that is really compelling and sellable to people. So that's part of what we do when we're making it create the change that they want and also positioning it so people buy it. So that's part of how we work on that.
It kind of reminded when you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, it's like going back to sales, like selling people on the transformation they have when they work with you versus the things they're actually going to do with you, where we get excited a lot of times about the things we do. Yeah. Like you said, the process versus after the process. If we knew all the little pieces, we might not want to do it all, but the end result is worth it. So
yeah, for sure. And, I think also knowing that the way I think about online courses is that, and I've sold some myself, is that like they're iterative, right? Like you start one, you get it out there, you get feedback, you tweak it. So I think being in that kind of experimental mindset is really helpful because I think we sometimes go into it and think like, I'll make this perfect thing, I'll package it out there and it will be a wild success, right? Which is amazing if that happens. There are things we can do to kind of help make it more successful early on, but it's also a process, right? Like it's just, we have to iterate just like anything else.
Yeah. And then for me personally, at least, I get stuck in analysis paralysis of like, oh, it needs to be perfect. What are all the things I have to do to make it perfect versus just doing it and then going from there. Mm-hmm. So to wrap up, so you've been on this journey of going through the different professions and kind of finding, how did you know, and this is kind of, once again, could be a big question, but to kind of wrap up all this stuff, how did you know that you have settled in, you know, to this place that feels right, like a good fit? I guess the easy answer could be, it felt right. But if there's a way you can use your awesome brain to verbalize that for people, because I feel like that's one of those things that, and that was back, I was talking about having coffee with Jacqueline. She's like, it's your intuition, you know. I love how you said earlier, look, I'm answering my own question. You litigate it to death, like when you just keep going over and over. So I guess what I'm imagining with this question is, you know, I just feel like people naturally go through their own journeys of like, they know, they're thinking, they're peeling back the layers, like, okay, now I've got this idea, but how do I know I really should run with this? How do I know?
Yeah. Well, I think those are like two slightly different things. Like, I think, how do people know if they have an idea that's like good or feels right? I think if it feels light to them and there's a lot of energy around it and they want to move towards it, they're curious, they have ideas, it sounds fun and interesting, can be a good place to start. And then taking action, right? It's really hard to know intellectually in our minds what something will be like before we do it. So I'm usually like trying to get people like, go see a client, do the thing, get out there to see if you like it, right? Then you get a lot of information back from that and kind of feeling your way into it. For me, I feel like one of the ways that I knew, and I think there'll still be different iterations of kind of what I'm doing, you know, in some different ways, but is that I'm really excited to get on calls with clients. Like, I'm excited to present to people, that I'm excited to talk about these things. I think when you are like really having to do a lot of pushing and like motivating it, like not every day, of course, right? Because some days you're just tired and you got to kind of push a little bit, right? I get that. But when as a whole, you feel really like I'm settled into the thing. Like, I like this. I want to know more about it. I want to talk more about it. I like people who are in this space. It just kind of fits. It just has like a good, like a fit feeling. That's great. Light, energetic, do the dang thing. Yeah. And has that great fit. That's so perfect. Well, Alyssa, thank you so much for sharing your journey and your wisdom of how to kind of break out of that box and do something non-traditional and kind of, I hate saying just be happy because it sounds so light, but like fulfilled. I think fulfilled is a good word. Looking for that fulfillment in life. So how can people get in touch with you? Yeah, I so appreciate you having me here. So thank you so much. People are welcome to get in touch on my website at dralyssaadams.com, or they can follow me on Instagram, also Dr. Alyssa, Alyssa Adams. So find me there, you know, connect. I'm always happy to talk with folks and get to know people a little better. Or they can listen to my podcast too, The Uncommon Couch. That's anywhere you find podcasts. Thank you. This was great.
And that's a wrap for now.
Thanks for listening to Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe and rate us on iTunes. For all things Flushing, visit our website at flushingitout.com. This has been a Spitfire production.
That was the greatest thing I've ever heard.